Introducing Korean broadcast content that you won't be able to stop watching. For weary modern souls, Dr. Romantic, the quirky genius doctor of Puldam Hospital, prescribes heartwarming tales of humanity. A couple together for 7 years sees their rose-tinted glasses shatter. Can they keep their relationship alive? Discover the raw stories of youth, work, and love. Beyond what social media can show, experience the vibrant Korea through its hidden gems. Mama, the ultimate K-pop festival for global fans. Find your star in a feast of trendy music and electrifying performances. Now, the whole world enjoys it together.
The White House says President Donald Trump hasn't set a deadline for receiving a proposal from Iran, rejecting reports of a 3 to 5 day deadline and adding that he is not rushing talks with Iran. South Korea's economy increased at its fastest pace in 5.5 years during the first quarter, growing by 1.7%, overcoming downward pressures from the recent conflict in the Middle East. South Korean chipmaker SK hynix announced record-high operating profit in the first quarter of this year. It stood at around $25.4 billion, up nearly fivefold from a year earlier, and more than double the previous quarter. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. The United States is holding off on setting a deadline for Iran talks, even as pressure mounts through a continued naval blockade and growing risks in the Strait of Hormuz. Our Muniran starts us off.
The White House says President Donald Trump is in no rush to lock in a timeline for negotiations with Iran, despite reports suggesting otherwise. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters on Wednesday there is no firm deadline for Tehran to submit what the U.S. has called a unified proposal, dismissing claims of a 3 to 5 day window as inaccurate.
The president has not set a deadline himself. Ultimately, he will dictate the timetable.
According to Fox News, Trump has also rejected the idea of any time pressure, saying the ceasefire extension will remain in place as long as needed while talks continue. Instead, officials say the timeline will ultimately be determined by the president, as Washington waits for clarity from what it describes as a divided Iranian leadership, split between pragmatists and hardliners. While direct military strikes have paused under the ceasefire, the broader pressure campaign has not. The White House says its naval blockade and economic measures remain fully in force, targeting Iran's oil exports and shipping routes. Leavitt described the blockade as a key source of leverage, claiming it is inflicting significant economic damage and limiting Iran's ability to move oil through its main export hub. Even as negotiations stall, U.S. officials argue this strategy is strengthening their position, with Trump reportedly viewing the ongoing economic squeeze as more effective than continued bombardment. But beneath a diplomatic standoff, a more complex and potentially long-lasting challenge is emerging in the Strait of Hormuz. According to the Washington Post, Pentagon officials have warned lawmakers that clearing sea mines laid by Iran could take up to 6 months and may not even begin until the war formally ends. The report, based on a classified congressional briefing, suggests more than 20 mines may have been deployed, some using GPS technology that makes them harder to detect. That assessment raises concerns that disruptions to one of the world's most critical oil routes could persist well beyond any ceasefire agreement. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Iran has escalated tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, firing on commercial vessels and seizing 2 ships in a move that underscores growing risks to global shipping. The incident comes despite an extended ceasefire announced by U.S. President Donald Trump, as Tehran signals both defiance at sea and apparent openness to diplomacy. Our Lee Soo-jin has more.
Iran on Wednesday fired on 3 commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz and seized 2 of them, marking a sharp escalation in tensions along one of the world's most critical shipping routes. The attacks happened just a day after U.S. President Donald Trump extended a ceasefire while keeping an American naval blockade on Iranian ports in place. Iranian state media said the country's Revolutionary Guard is now escorting the seized ships into Iranian waters. The White House, however, said the action does not violate the current truce, noting the vessels were not American or Israeli. The latest incident adds to a growing pattern of maritime aggression. Since the conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran began in late February, there have been more than 30 reported attacks on ships in the region. Prior to that, the Strait of Hormuz had remained open to international traffic. Despite the escalation, Iranian's President Masoud Pezeshkian signaled openness to diplomacy. In a social media post on Wednesday, he said Iran remains committed to resolving disputes through dialogue, but criticized what he called breaches of commitments and ongoing blockades, accusing Washington of contradictory actions. Iran's parliamentary speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf also weighed in, saying a meaningful ceasefire cannot exist alongside maritime restrictions or continued military operations by Israel. He warned that the vital waterway could remain closed if ceasefire violations continue, raising concerns about further disruption to global energy supplies and trade. 이수진, Arirang News.
South Korea's special envoy to the Middle East, Chung Byung-ah, has met Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi to discuss the safety of vessels in the Strait of Hormuz and South Korean citizens. Arirang TV found on Thursday that the meeting was abruptly arranged and held the previous day. Chung is believed to have conveyed that Seoul deems its ties with Tehran as very important and that both sides agree bilateral relations should continue to be developed going forward. The South Korean envoy has strongly requested that attention be paid to the protection of Korean nationals in Iran, and the Iranian side responded they would actively cooperate on that matter. Seoul also has long raised the need to ensure free and safe passage of vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, where some 26 South Korean ships remain. Chung was sent to Tehran earlier this month as a special envoy of Foreign Minister Cho Hyun. Over in Hanoi, President Lee Jae-myung and Vietnam's top leader To Lam have held talks amid heightened global uncertainties. Cooperation on energy and railway projects topped the agenda. Our correspondent Yoon Jang-mei reports from Hanoi.
President Lee Jae-myung, who is on a state visit to Hanoi, was given a red carpet welcome by To Lam, Vietnam's top political leader. The friendly mood was reflected in Wednesday's summit.
당 서기장께서는 지난해 우리 정부 출범 후에 첫 번째 국빈으로 방한하셨고 또 이번 저의 베트남 방문은 베트남의 새 지도부 출범 후 2주 만에 이루어진 베트남의 첫 국빈 방문으로
Your visit, Mr. President, clearly shows our comprehensive strategic partnership that is based upon strong, effective, and deep trust.
Amid the current tensions in the Middle East, the Korean president said Korea and Vietnam will work together on energy and infrastructure based on profound mutual trust.
최근 중동 상황에서 비롯된 공급망 불안정성 속에서 양국 간 협력의 필요성이 더욱 커졌다는 데 공감하였습니다. 에너지 안보 강화와 공급망 안정을 위해 더욱 긴밀히 협력하기로
A dozen MOUs were signed on energy, infrastructure, and technology, including power infrastructure and nuclear power plants.
Vietnam welcomes Korean companies expanding investment in areas such as infrastructure, smart cities, semiconductors, large-scale AI data centers, nuclear power plants, smart ports, and next-generation ports.
The two countries plan to cooperate on the Ho Chi Minh City Metro Railway, with South Korea's Hyundai Rotem set to play a major part in this $110 million project. Korean firms are also eyeing urban development and airport projects in Vietnam. By 2030, Seoul and Hanoi aim to expand their annual bilateral trade to $150 billion. The two countries signed an MOU to allow exports of heat-treated poultry products, to expand cooperation on agricultural and food products. People-to-people exchanges was also on the agenda.
상대국 국민과 다문화 가정의 안정적인 체류와 권익 증진을 위해 긴밀하게 협력해 나가기로 하였습니다.
We also have agreed to share experiences on culture and entertainment industries, such as film, music, and gaming, and bolster mutual support.
It was the two leaders' second engagement in about 8 months, following the Vietnamese leader's trip to Korea last August. The South Korean president's reciprocal visit to Vietnam so early in his presidency is seen as carrying symbolic significance in terms of Seoul's strategic priorities. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Hanoi.
South Korea's economy posted its strongest quarterly growth in over 5 years in the first quarter of this year, defying market expectations. The surprise growth comes despite geopolitical risks surrounding the conflict in the Middle East. Our Kim Do-yeon has more.
According to the Bank of Korea's advanced estimate on Thursday, the nation's real gross domestic product grew by 1.7% from the previous quarter. On a yearly basis, it's grown 3.6%. This significantly outperforms expectations and overcomes concerns over the situation in the Middle East, which severely hit South Korea's energy and petroleum sector. In fact, this quarter-on-quarter figure is nearly double the central bank's earlier projection of 0.9% and marks the highest growth rate since the third quarter of 2020.
To summarize the first quarter growth, private consumption acted as a pillar of support, while strong exports centered on semiconductors and investments to expand semiconductor production capacity drove the overall growth.
Looking closely at the data, the manufacturing sector expanded by 3.9%. Overall exports surged 5.1%, heavily fueled by global demand for information technology products. This resulted in net exports contributing 1.1 percentage points to the overall economic growth figure. Domestic demand also showed a solid recovery, adding 0.6 percentage points to the GDP. Facilities investment climbed 4.8% and construction investment rose 2.8%. Private consumption grew by 0.5%, supported by increased spending on goods like clothing. Additionally, real gross domestic income surged 7.5% on quarter. This marks the highest increase since the first quarter of 1988, indicating a significant expansion in the nation's purchasing power due to improved terms of trade. Meanwhile, the government attributed this strong performance to both favorable market conditions and active policy interventions.
In addition to strong exports driven by the semiconductor boom, policy effects such as capital market revitalization and consumption support measures contributed greatly. I also believe our swift response to the Middle East war played a part.
He added that as ceasefire negotiations are delayed and uncertainties remain high, the government will not let its guard down. Prior to this release, the Bank of Korea had projected an annual economic growth rate of 2.1% for the year. But with the positive surprise growth in the first quarter and the negative impact of the Middle East situation expected to become clearer in the second quarter, the public now waits to see which factor weighs the most on the annual growth rate. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And South Korean chipmaker SK hynix hit new highs across all major performance indicators in the first quarter of 2026. The company announced Thursday that its operating profit stood at around $25.4 billion, up nearly fivefold from a year earlier and more than double the previous quarter. Revenue also hit a new high, nearly tripling to about $35.5 billion. Those figures helped push the company's operating profit margin to a record 72%, up from 58% in the previous quarter. SK hynix attributed the strong performance to surging demand for artificial intelligence memory chips, along with increased sales of high-end products like HBM and high-capacity server DRAM modules. South Korea and the United States are aiming to complete conditions for transferring wartime operational control to Seoul by early 2029. Speaking at a congressional hearing in Washington on Wednesday, U.S. Forces Korea Commander General Xavier Brunson said both sides are targeting the first quarter of that year to meet the requirements for the long-planned handover. The transition is based on specific conditions, including South Korea's ability to lead combined forces, strengthen strike and air defense capabilities, and a stable regional security environment. The push comes as President Lee Jae-myung's administration seeks to regain wartime command before the end of its term in 2030. South Korea, well known for its long working hours, is now waking up to the importance of a good night's sleep. A growing thirst for healthier lifestyles is driving growth across related industries. Our Kim Junong takes a closer look.
It's lunchtime and the streets of Seoul's Gangnam district quickly fill with office workers stepping out to eat. But 25-year-old Park Kyung-jin skips the rush, heading instead to a nearby sleep cafe. Inside a dim, quiet room with a bed, she lies down and soon falls asleep.
I heard about this place from my coworkers and decided to give it a try. I usually don't get enough sleep and feel tired all the time. So instead of lunch and coffee, I'd rather have extra sleep to stay productive in the afternoon.
With earplugs and eye masks, massage chairs, and relaxing music, this calming spot draws workers like Park at lunchtime.
About 90% of our customers are office workers from nearby. And those coming from farther away say they wish there were a place like this near their office.
Trading meals for sleep shows how little Koreans are sleeping.
Koreans sleep an average of 6 hours and 50 minutes per night, about an hour and a half less than the OECD average. That makes Korea one of the lowest ranking countries in the OECD for sleep, with sleep disorders also on the rise.
Longer working hours and intense competition are key drivers of this pattern in a culture that places a premium on productivity and visible results.
Koreans have a strong focus on how things appear to others. But sleep is a highly personal, private activity that isn't visible, so it's often overlooked and pushed aside.
But changing lifestyles and growing interest in inner wellness are beginning to shift perceptions. Such changes are reflected in the rapid growth of the sleep industry. The value of South Korea's sleep market has grown more than tenfold over the past decade, reaching about $3.4 billion last year. The global market is expected to hit around $98 billion this year. The range of products is also diversifying, from mattresses and pillows to health supplements, aromatherapy, and lighting. In particular, South Korea is emerging as a key player in sleep tech, combining advanced ICT with personalized sleep solutions.
For example, lighting systems integrated with smart technology can turn off as users fall asleep, adjust to an optimal color tone, or trigger personalized wake-up sounds.
Changing lifestyles and a growing thirst for a better sleep is giving rise to a new business frontier. Kim Junong, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. Israeli strikes in southern Lebanon on Wednesday killed at least 5 people, including a journalist, in the deadliest day since a 10-day ceasefire took effect. Lebanese journalist Ammar Khalil was killed when rescuers were blocked from reaching her after strikes hit the building she had taken cover in. Lebanon's prime minister called the obstruction of rescue efforts, quote, war crimes. Israel denied blocking any rescue operation and said it had targeted cars that had left a Hezbollah military structure. Lebanon's president said Thursday's talks with Israel will push for a ceasefire extension beyond its Sunday expiry. In the UK, any child aged 17 or younger today will never legally be able to buy a cigarette for the rest of their lives. UK lawmakers passed a landmark law on Wednesday that raises the legal smoking age by 1 year every year. This means anyone born on or after January 1st, 2009 faces a lifetime ban on purchasing tobacco. The law also bans vaping and nicotine product sales to under 18s and tightens advertising rules. The government says smoking kills around 64,000 people a year in England alone and costs the National Health Service £3 billion each year. The United States is expected to reclassify marijuana as a less dangerous drug. The decision at a federal level would reclassify cannabis at the same level as common painkillers. This follows an executive order signed by President Trump in December directing the loosening of federal marijuana regulations. Cannabis firms will also see lower tax burdens and find it easier to secure funding. Shares of major cannabis companies surged as much as 23% on the news. A crypto billionaire has taken the Trump family's digital currency company to federal court, claiming it secretly locked him out of his own holdings and threatened to wipe them out entirely. Justin Sun, founder of the Tron cryptocurrency, put $45 million into World Liberty Financial, a venture co-founded by President Trump and his sons. His lawsuit claims the company blocked him from selling his tokens, stripped him of voting rights, and embedded hidden tools to freeze or permanently delete holdings without cause. World Liberty CEO Zach Witkoff called the claims entirely without merit. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
After days of hazy skies, today brings a much nicer view. The yellow dust has moved out and most of the country will enjoy clear skies and brighter conditions. While the skies look pleasant, the air is becoming quite dry across Gangwon-do province and east of Gyeongsang-pukdo province. Dry weather combined with gusty winds can quickly raise wildfire danger, so take extra caution with anything that could start a fire. Temperature-wise, we are still dealing with classic spring mood swings. With breezy mornings and warmer afternoons, layered clothing is a better option. And this afternoon, Seoul and Gwangju will be getting up to 23 degrees Celsius. However, Jeju Island will see lingering rain into the afternoon at a high of 16 degrees Celsius. Then it looks like we'll have sunny and warmer than average through the weekend, with pleasant spring weather conditions continuing across much of the country.
That's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.
해금은 두 줄로 된 현악기인데 저도 처음에 시작하게 된 거는 그 두 줄에서 너무 다양한 소리가 나오는 게 너무 신기했고 일단 해금이 되게 사람의 목소리랑 좀 비슷하다고 많이들 하세요. 줄을 눌러서 이렇게 음을 계속 왔다 갔다 진동하는 그런 형태를 띠고 있다 보니까 애절하다라고 많이 말씀을 해주시는 것 같아요. 이 곡은 제가 좀 오래 좋아했던 친구에 대한 제 여러 감정을 담은 곡인데요. 슬펐던 마음, 혹은 뭐 고마웠던 마음, 이런 여러 가지 감정들을 한데 묶어서 마음이 담긴 곡이라고 할 수 있습니다. 현대적인 음악으로 이제 재구성하는 단계를 거칠 때 항상 중요하게 생각하는 거는 음악의 분위기를 해치지 않는 선에서는 전통적인 주법들, 식임새, 이런 전통의 냄새라고 할까요? 맛? 이런 걸 살릴 수 있는 요소들을 좀 집어넣으려고 하는 편이에요. 저는 요새 연주하면서도 스스로가 마음도 편하고 몸도 편안한 음악들을 좀 자주 들려드리고 싶다. 제가 음악으로 위로받았던 것처럼 제가 하는 음악들로 여러분들이 좀 위로받을 수 있는 순간이 있었으면 좋겠다. 그런 무대를 만들려고 노력해야겠다라는 생각을 했던 것 같습니다.